Okay, good morning, everybody. This is Inquisition Update. You're listening to LibertyRadioLive.com. We'll continue with our reading and discussion of the book The Vatican Billions by Avro Manhattan, the most important book for our understanding of the Vatican Jesuit-led New World Order. The New World Order is a Vatican global hegemony. We're talking about the rise of control and power of the Roman Catholic Church in the world. Now, yesterday, we began the chapter entitled, The Roman Catholic Church Welcomes the Rise of Bolshevism. Now, the first question you would ask is, why in the world would the Roman Catholic Church be behind godless communism? What bedfellows would be the Roman Catholic Church and Bolshevism? Well, there's a strategy behind everything Rome does. And her secret alliance and support of Bolshevism had a purpose. And that was the destruction of the Russian Orthodox Church, which had grown into extraordinary power and wealth in Russia. And no doubt the Vatican saw the Russian Orthodox Church as a threat. And she had to put it down. And she used godless communism to do it. Godless communism was injected into Russia, supported by the Roman Catholic Church, to destroy the Orthodox Church. And also we see at this time the rise of fascism. And that's what we're going to talk about this morning. Now, backing up a paragraph or two from where we were yesterday, the last full paragraph, page 125 of the book, if you're reading along. Again, the title of the book is The Vatican Billions by Avro Manhattan. The Church Welcomes the Rise of Bolshevism. It says, in 1922, Mussolini became Prime Minister of Italy. The Vatican, who was still flirting with Bolsheviks, cold-shouldered him. Indeed, she launched a new Catholic party to fight fascism. Now, eventually, the Roman Catholic Church and fascism are going to be the best bedfellows. So we're talking about just an initial shake-up here. It's not going to last long. Now, he continues. He says, in 1925, however, after the Vatican Kremlin, secret negotiations were cut off, the Vatican reoriented her policy and adopted fascism. She made a secret deal with Mussolini. The Pope would support fascism, provided Mussolini supported the Vatican and fought Bolshevism. Okay, this is the outward policy. The secret policy was the support of Bolshevism. Now, the following year, in 1926, the leader of the Catholic Party was ordered by the Pope himself to disband his party. Its former members were advised then to support fascism. Okay, we're going to see this again in our discussion in this book, particularly during the Second World War. But the Vatican disbanded the Roman Catholic Party, the Catholic Party, and ordered its supporters to support fascism. So all the Catholic momentum is being thrown upon the fascist regime. Now it says in 1929 the Pope signed the Lateran Treaty and a concordat with Mussolini. The Vatican fascist betrothal became a formal and official marriage at the signing of this concordat and the Lateran Treaty. They become official bed partners. Now, the fascist Catholic union was an event of the utmost importance for Europe and the West, for it created two precedents. Or rather, it laid the foundations for two basic Catholic policies. The first of these was the one by which the Catholic Church identified herself with the two extreme political embodiments of Western right-wing conservatism, fascism, and Nazism. whose main objective became the containment and ultimate destruction of Bolshevism, Russian or otherwise. Now remember, this same Bolshevism that Rome was wont to use against the Orthodox Church in Russia would just as assuredly be a threat to Roman Catholicism, because it was anti-clerical, it was anti-religious, it was anti-establishment. And what was the establishment? The Roman Catholic Church in Europe and the Orthodox Church in Russia. So she's going to use Bolshevism to destroy the Orthodox of Russia, and then she's going to use fascism to destroy the Bolsheviks, so that the Roman Catholic Church won't be threatened by either Bolshevism or the Orthodox Church. Okay. Now, where was I? The main objective to become the containment and ultimate destruction of Bolshevism, Russian or otherwise. And the second, and the one which is of paramount interest to our present scrutiny, was the signing of the Lateran Treaty. Now, many of my listeners know that this is where we begin to believe is when the papacy got its second wind. Remember, we're talking about the period after the French Revolution and the suppression of the papacy. The Pope lost its temporal power. Well, the Pope is gaining by leaps and bounds now. The papacy has come out of its grave at the signing of the Lateran Accords with fascist Mussolini. Now, this is, to put it in biblical terms, this is when the deadly wound was healed, 1929. It's largely regarded by Bible studiers as the time when the beast began to heal its mortal wound. Now, the treaty was the official seal of the end of the temporal possessions of the church, which she renounced once and for all. That is, the gift which Pepin had handed to her in the 8th century, known as the Papal States. All right, the papacy has come to terms. She's going to lose the Papal States once and for all. It's over. But let me tell you something. Rome appears publicly to be suffering the loss of so much property. But what we're embarking on is an entirely new war strategy for the papacy. Listen, it's no great loss to the papacy to lose the Papal States if fascism and American democracy and other nations and governments of the world conquer the world for the Pope. So the sacrifice of the Papal States is nothing but an outward appearance of loss of power to draw sympathy, when in fact the strategy is global conquest. She's losing the Papal States, but she's gaining the whole world. And watch how this happens as we continue reading the book. Now, when in 1870 the Italians had wrenched the Papal States from the popes, the latter immured themselves within the walls of the Vatican to protect against the quote-unquote theft, obdurately refusing to set foot outside the Vatican. Pope Pius IX, Pope Leo XIII, Pope Pius X, Pope Benedict XV, and Pius XI, once inside the Vatican, never came out of it. With the treaty, however, the Lateran Treaty, the popes recognized their former papal territory as an integral part of Italy. In exchange for such recognition, they demanded and received a payment for what had once belonged to them. So the papacy has resigned her temporal possessions of the Papal States, but she's going to take payment for them. And watch what she does with that payment. It says, it was a solid one. The Roman Catholic Church, a religion which concerned itself with the things of a religion which concerns itself with the things of heaven, bargained in the businesslike manner of a good, go-ahead modern concern. She did not give anything for nothing. She asked and bargained for sound, solid, earthly investments in the form of money, bank credit, and government bonds. No nonsense about evangelical poverty here, even less about the selling of one's riches and giving the proceeds to the poor. Here the author is recognizing that the Roman Catholic Church is not the Church of Jesus Christ. It is a power and wealth megalomaniac. And she's coming loose here. She has learned to transition from the serfdom that she controlled in the agrarian period of world history, and now is adapting herself to not only survive, but to rise to controlling power in the new industrial world. An incredible transformation taking place in the papal strategy to gain world conquest. Now it says the Lateran Treaty was signed in February of 1929. Italy recognized the sovereignty of the Holy See based on the Vatican State, covering in all an area of under 1 square mile. About 109 acres. The Bible calls it that great city, that mighty city that ruleth over the kings of the earth. It's 1 square mile, the smallest, by a long shot, the smallest independent state in the world, and it is the most powerful as well. So saith God in the Scriptures. Now it says the Pope within that area, that 1 square mile, is absolute ruler with religious, judicial, and legislative power. The vast territories which the Roman Catholic Church had misruled, misappropriated, and ruined during a whole millennium were thus reduced to the microscopic state of the present day. The Roman Catholic Church, however, while resigning herself to her loss, insisted on her pound of flesh, and she tried to get as much as she could from the sale. That is the sale of the papal states. Remember, she was handsomely rewarded for her papal states by Mussolini. Now we're continuing. It says fascist Italy paid her 750 million lira, and Italian 5% bonds to the nominal value of 100 million lira. So this is, while one might say an extraordinary amount, certainly not full compensation for all of the money, all of the land that she had been divested of. But watch what Rome does with this seed money. It says physically, the Vatican had been reduced to the tiniest state in the world, an independent ecclesiastical machine and working theocracy poised on a speck of dust. The sum she received, although seemingly a large one, was small in view of the thousands of square miles she had to surrender. Yet the millions she got as quote-unquote compensation were the seeds of the billions she was to collect in the following decades. She had almost discarded her traditional ways of collecting the riches of the earth. From now on, she would multiply her millions in the same way as contemporary society. In other words, she would behave as the rest of the world. Another positive identifying characteristic that this is not the Church of Jesus Christ. This is the church of the world. She would multiply her millions in the same way as contemporary society. That is, she was going to beat the great industrial and financial concerns, trusts, and corporations of the world at their own game, and thus become a mammonic colossus in her own right. The years 1929 and 1930, therefore, became a milestone in the annals of the Catholic Church. For if the Lateran Treaty closed an era, it also simultaneously opened another. It was the beginning of a period when the wealth of the future would surpass beyond imagination the riches of the past. Now, we've talked about the immense wealth of the Roman Catholic Church, as this author calls the past, when she owned at least as much as a third of all Europe, and at one time nearly half of England, the arable lands of England. She's going to surpass that wealth, according to this author, in the Vatican Billions by Avro Manhattan. Now, chapter 17 of this book is entitled First Foundations of a 20th Century Catholic Financial Empire. And I'll need a cue from the station. I still don't have any audio, Nicholas, so when we're ready for the break, you'll have to give me a cue. Now, First Foundations of a 20th Century Catholic Financial Empire. The Roman Catholic Church is going to build a financial colossus to compete with any other financial power in the world. It says, following the Lateran Treaty of February 1929, the then reigning Pope, Pope Pius XI, set up a special agency to administer the $100 million which Mussolini's fascist Italy had put into the Vatican coffers. With this agency, the Catholic Church initiated a brand new policy which has characterized her exertions in the world ever since. That is, one of international investments. International monetary investments and land investments. We're going to talk about all of these. It was a step which, although taking her along the dangerous road of international speculation, financial somersaults, and political risks, nevertheless, within an astonishingly short time, yielded rich dividends. That year, 1930, can be said to have been the beginning of such a new era. The agency was not entirely a novel one, being the offspring of an elderly parent. The administration of the goods of the Holy See, it was called, originally established by Pope Leo XIII as far back as 1878. This had been instituted to deal with the financial affairs of the transformed and battered papal economy after the loss of its temporal dominions in 1870. The papacy now set out in earnest to devise schemes for the investment of millions now at her disposal. This she did by promptly investing a large portion of them in Italy itself. Okay, Italy's where she lost the Papal States. So she's going to battle back by starting in Italy to gain even more land and more real estate than she had when she owned the Papal States. Now watch this. It says, thanks to this, Vatican money soon found its way into the sinews of Italian high finance, commerce, industry, real estate, and the like. The process was greatly facilitated by the Vatican's favorable political relations with the fascist dictatorship. But if this was an important factor, it was by no means the only one. Others, no less important, contributed to the launching of the successful financial operation. They were of varying natures, but their combined activities played no mean part in the venture. Some of the main ones can be summarized in the fact that A, the Vatican had her own banks. Okay? The Vatican has her own banks. B, she had been exempted by fascism from crushing taxation. In other words, she's tax-free. Okay? Can't charge the church taxes. Now, number C, and this is very important, She had at her service an intelligence machinery second to none. Let me read that again. She had at her service an intelligence machinery second to none. Now look, if you're going to survive and thrive in an economic world through investments, you have to have the best financial information available. And that takes intelligence. That takes connections. And guess who she's going to rely on for those connections? High-placed Roman Catholics in banking and business and real estate and industry. The Vatican is the most proficient inside trader on the planet because she's got a world full of Catholics that love her and that occupy these positions where deals are made. And she simply gets the phone calls and does what she's told, and her millions compound beyond comprehension. The Vatican is an inside trader. She's got inside information from devout Roman Catholics in positions where the money is made, where the deals are made. Now, she's going to be a shrewd trader from here on out. It says the Vatican directly and indirectly controlled several well-established banking concerns, such as the Bank of the Holy Spirit. Imagine a bank named after the Holy Spirit. This is blasphemy. The Bank of the Holy Spirit, founded in Rome in 1608, and the Bank of Rome, founded in 1808, in addition to which she had a finger in the internal machineries of various other banking and financial interests, which, while seemingly very remote from the Vatican, nevertheless cooperated very closely with it. Now, you can just imagine that that's a connection through Catholic lay people in these banks. Now, it says Mussolini had agreed to exempt most of the Vatican's investments from taxation, thus indirectly adding more millions to those already received. And the intelligence network of the Vatican, represented by the hierarchy, we're talking about the cardinals and the bishops and the prelates of the Roman Catholic Church, as well as by Catholics placed in key positions in the financial and industrial world, supplied the Vatican investors with the highly confidential information not available to anyone else. There's your insider trading. It works, and we'll talk about it more when we get back from the break. We're going to return now where we left off before the break. It says the intelligence network of the Vatican, represented by the hierarchy, that's the prelates of the Roman Catholic Church, from the Pope right on down to the parish priest, as well as by Catholics placed in key positions in financial and in the industrial world, supplied the Vatican's investors with highly confidential information not available to anybody else, thus making the Vatican privy to profitable speculations before the before the general public, and indeed prior even to some official financial centers in Italy and abroad. So the Vatican is an international investor, and that is possible because she's an international religious colossus, and her prelates and her lay people are woven throughout all of these investment institutions, and the Vatican gets the best information, and she gets it first. If there's any money to be made, the Vatican is given the first opportunity. That's what this author is telling us, and he's in a position to know. Now it says, last but not least, the Roman Catholic Church had the support of the fascist dictatorship. The latter saw to it that she should identify herself not only ideologically by opposing Bolshevism at home and abroad, but equally financially with the regime, so that the millions which the Vatican was investing in the fascist economy should become the best guarantors of her support for fascism, irrespective of minor disputes about local matters. The papal fascist policy was a resounding success. For the next 10 years, from the signing of the Lateran Treaty in 1929, when that wound began to mend, to the outbreak of the Second World War, the millions had been so skillfully invested that they yielded vast profits in liquid money and evaluation of real estate investment and the general upward reassessment of industrial concerns and shares. The increasing prosperity of industry resulted from the mountingly belligerent policy of the Vatican's partner, fascist Italy. Now, Rome's ready to go to war with this fascist dictator she's in bed with. It says, for Mussolini, meanwhile, had begun to move upon a path of aggression. A few years after the Lateran Treaty, secure in the knowledge of his support of the Vatican, he embarked on his first large-scale foreign aggression. He attacked and invaded and occupied Ethiopia. Now, fascist Italy was Catholic. And we're going back to the same old thing, conquest. This is a crusade against Ethiopia. And it had two objectives, at least two objectives. One was the financial conquest and the territorial conquest of Ethiopia, but the destruction, or the destruction of Bible Christianity in Ethiopia. And a name comes to mind. I wish I could speak more elaborately upon it, but it was Haile Selassie. And we know from the Bible that the gospel had been carried to Ethiopia. And I'm certain that the Vatican saw this as a threat. And so it was necessary to Catholicize Ethiopia. And how better to do that? By brute conquest. And that's why the Vatican supported fascist Mussolini's attack of Ethiopia in 1936. Now, the Catholic Church blessed the venture. Priests and bishops sprinkled departing troops, warplanes, tanks, and guns with holy water. That's right. The priests went around splashing holy water on the weapons of war, blessing the weapons of war. This is a church of war. Cardinal Spellman did the same thing during the Vietnam War, according to this same author in the book Vietnam, Why Did We Go? It was a religious crusade. And it continues, it says, it was a sight to shock the most cynical of unbelievers. In other words, they made a big production about making this openly a religious conflict, splattering holy water on these war material. Now, in addition to such brazen support, the Roman Catholic Church helped fascist Italy secretly with money and loans, transacted through devious channels, thanks to the close links which existed between the Italian banks and industrial concerns and the government. It must be remembered that most Italian industry had been geared to this war for some years, and that the Vatican had invested a good share of its Lateran Treaty millions in fascist war industries. You know, when this is all over and Christ returns, it says they will not learn war anymore. So what's the antithesis of that? A church calling itself Christian who makes money at war, who aggrandizes herself through aggression and war. This is the Church of Antichrist. Make no mistake about it. She was going to increase her millions that she gained through the Lateran Treaty and Concordat with fascist Mussolini by investing in war industries. And this is exactly what Rome does even today. You remember President Eisenhower's video speech where he addressed the American people and he warned us about the military-industrial complex and how they would control the government if they were not put under control. It was just a clandestine reference to the Roman Catholic Church. And this is the start of it, the investment of the Roman Catholic Church in war-making industries. They are the military and industrial complex. They're the vast shareholders of war-making industries. And they foment the wars of the world so that they can benefit and profit from war. Now it says, this it had done not so much to help fascism as to help herself, insofar as it judged this a good investment, since war industries, when serving a government in need of armaments and of ever more sophisticated weapons, had always been the best yielders of profits. Okay, profit is the motivation for the Roman Catholic Church, material wealth, and she's got insider traders all over the world. They determine that the best yields on her investments are through war industries, and that's where Rome invests her money. It says the Vatican, consistently on the lookout for good gains, had heavily subscribed to them, and as an investor whose main concern was profit, it acted as any lay corporation would. Besides which, there was the allure of immense profits to come with the annexation of Ethiopia. Apart from the religious aspect, Rome's always apart from the religious aspect unless it's her religion, the Vatican had been greatly impressed by the vista of great financial prospects and of profitable investments in land, real estate, and commercial ventures in a new, vast, fascist empire in Africa. Okay, the conquest of Africa is on Rome's itinerary for global conquest. So Rome has to get a foothold in Africa, starting with Ethiopia, through fascist Italy. And it says Mussolini had been generous with promises about this so long as he got the papacy's support. So it says the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her. This is it. Mussolini is in bed with the church. He doesn't rule for the benefit of his own people. He's helping the church, the Roman Catholic Church. The kings of the earth are committing fornication with the papacy, with the Roman Catholic Church. Unlawful intercourse, unlawful dialogue, war-making plans, and killing people, and stealing their goods. It's quite a tete-a-tete. Now it says, while the Abyssinian aggression was still very much in progress, the Vatican embarked upon a policy of financial and land investment with consummate expertise. Where's she getting the expertise? We've already told you. It says, in addition, profiting from Mussolini's war venture, it invested in sounder, even if slower, profit-yielding speculations. This it did by cleverly exploiting the rise in land values caused by the rapid growth and expansion of Rome itself. So she's going to be heavily invested in property in Rome. And it says within a few years, the Vatican became landlord of ever more profitable real estate within and outside of Rome. It began to own large blocks of flats, offices, and valuable stretches of development land on the outskirts of the city. The latter yielded 100% and sometimes even 1,000% profits with the inevitable construction boom that followed. You know, the Pope's into the burbs, buying up the burbs, developing the land, a big landowner. Now, in this manner, thanks to its financial expertise, foresight, and calculations, thanks to fascist protection, and to its vast ecclesiastical and lay machinery, Within the brief span of a decade, the Vatican built up a large fortune within that very Italy which only 50 years before had deprived it of the Papal States. Just one decade, and already the Vatican has more real estate, more financial benefit than she had when she owned the Papal States. See how quickly the Church of Antichrist recovers. Now, while engaged upon the building of a financial imperium in Italy, the Vatican was by no means idly outside it. Indeed, its activities were no less varied and energetic abroad. In nominally Protestant countries like Holland and Germany, where it had quietly amassed vast sums, it continued its policy of acquisition, avoiding whenever possible any spectacular move, since silence and unobtrusiveness were the best methods for pursuing a policy of economic penetration in a potentially inimical community. In other words, we're going to invest in these Protestant nations, because ultimately we have to control them. Global conquest, remember? We have to own it. And so they began to invest and grow power and strength and control of these Protestant nations to eventually destroy Protestantism, just as much as she was interested in destroying the Orthodox Church in Russia. She's equally interested in destroying the second schism of the great Roman Catholic Church, the Protestant Reformation. The Protestant Reformation found refuge in these countries. Now Rome's investing financially in those countries so she can eventually control them. The Catholicization of Protestant nations like Holland and Germany. And it gets worse. And you can see it in this country today. The Vatican's investments in the United States and her investments in our war industries has embellished her bank account to the point where she can afford to put people in our own churches to teach us false doctrine, to get us away from the Bible and get us into works of gospel. This is the ecumenical movement. We're paying the price for allowing Rome to take over in this country. Toppling the Protestant Reformation is the ultimate goal, because it's the only thing that stands between the Roman Catholic Church and global conquest. The Protestant Reformation, the only energy ever that uprised in the world that threatened the very seat of Satan in the world. The Protestant Reformation. It must be destroyed. And you got to do it in the Protestant nations. We are a target of the Vatican. It's called the Counter-Reformation. It will not end until Rome is destroyed, which will not occur until Christ returns. So we have to abandon this ecumenical movement. We have to recognize Rome's power and influence and how she operates in the world historically, and with that we can see then with common sense and clear vision how she operates in this country today. That's the purpose of reading this book. That is the whole purpose of Inquisition Update. Now, wherever its riches were secure, in nations like Catholic Poland, for instance, where its possessions had multiplied since the country's rebirth after the First World War, the Vatican seldom interfered with ecclesiastical pressure in the domestic affairs of the country. It wasn't needed. The same was true of Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Austria, Belgium, and other European countries, where the economic affairs of the Roman Catholic Church had a certain stability, and therefore a potentially bright future. Thanks to this, the properties in those countries continue to increase in value, while its financial transactions, mainly carried out by the national hierarchies, enjoyed the favor of sundry governments. Where, however, such stability was lacking and the riches of the Roman Catholic Church were threatened, there the Vatican intervened by means of religious, political, church-state, religious, political, and diplomatic pressure to defend its interests. When Rome defends her interests, which are always material, she uses religious pressure, political pressure, and diplomatic pressure. And it says these were not only of a religious nature, since more often than not they had a solid earthly character: land, real estate, stocks, and shares. Thus, when a semi-anarchical, communist-inspired political abortion called the Popular Front took the reins in France in the middle 30s, which would have threatened the Pope's earthly possessions, the Vatican, which had so definitely committed herself with fascist Italy and Nazi Germany, got scared. The Popular Front, with its semi-Bolshevik program, seemed likely to be the herald of a communist France. A communist France would have behaved, so far as the Vatican's interests were concerned, worse than the French Revolution or the atheistic French Republic of the beginning of the century. The Vatican, therefore, came out strongly against the Popular Front government. Catholic right-wing organizations modeled on fascism came to the fore. For example, Les Croix Diffus, excuse me for the pronunciation. Now, there was talk of an impending civil war, and that was not mere scaremongering. Civil war had already broke out behind the Pyrenees in neighboring Spain, where a similar government had abysmally failed. Economic crises, political chaos, and assassinations had become the order of the day. Communism and anarchy loomed real, menacing, and imminent. In the eyes of the Vatican, the continuation of such instability endangered not only the spiritual interests of the Church, but also her earthly riches. A large portion of these had already gone, for in 1931 the Spanish Republic did exactly what French and Russians had already done during their revolutions: the dispossession of the Roman Catholic Church of all her property. One of the Republic's first actions, in fact, had been to despoil the Jesuits of everything they owned. This is the first time that I'm aware of so far in this book where Avro Manhattan has actually mentioned the Jesuits. But their activities have been sprinkled out throughout every event since their founding in 1540 in this book. Now, the Vatican, or the Jesuits, apparently were all controlling, and this was the motivation behind the suppression of the Jesuits. This was always the reason for the suppression of the Jesuits. The Jesuits were hated in Roman Catholic countries. They kept fomenting religious wars. They kept controlling the governments and using the governments to oppress the people and to put more power and control upon the papacy. Eventually, they were completely destroyed by a bull by Pope Clement XIV. But we're getting ahead of ourselves here. It says their possessions, the Jesuits' possessions, had not been limited to small parcels that would enable the poor of Christ to plant soybeans, nor were they designed solely to provide for destitute widows and orphans. The Church was the largest, richest landowner in the whole of Spain, even larger than the decadent aristocracy with which she had been so intimately linked that often it was difficult to distinguish one from the other. The Republic impartially dispossessed both of their goods, with the result that it found itself with no less than 13 million acres of land, which it parceled out in small holdings of about a million peasants. The property of the Roman Catholic Church in Spain at this period, around about 1933, was, according to John Gunther, worth no less than $500 million. Most of this being controlled by the Jesuits. When the Spanish Republic confiscated the vast holdings, quote-unquote vast holdings, it was officially confirmed that they were worth 6,000 million pesetas. And before the inflation which followed, this meant a worth of more than $1 billion. $1 billion just in Spain in 1933. That's a lot of moolah. A lot of moolah in one country. The Jesuits owned the country. Now, it says this colossal sum, it must be remembered, was what remained after the church's property had already been substantially reduced by the wicked legislators during the previous century, when Spain went through one or two bouts of anti-clericalism. In the old days, it had been estimated the church owned or controlled between 80 and 90% of all the accumulated wealth of the Iberian Peninsula. By the start of the First World War, this had been cut down to 60%.